Hello, I'm Katie Derham and welcome to the Richard Burnett Historical Collection of Early Keyboard Instruments, which forms the core of what used to be the Finchcock's Musical Museum and which is still the most exceptional resource and charity for anybody who's passionate about early keyboards.
Hello, my name is Stephen Devine and I'm here at the Richard Burnett Collection of Historical Keyboard Instruments. It's my pleasure to demonstrate this wonderful grand piano by John Broadwood and Sons. It was made in 1823 in London and it's an absolutely typical example of where the piano industry was during this period. Up until this point, pianos precisely had been about the beauty of sound quality, but by the time this instrument was being built, the emphasis was much more on projection and volume of sound. So here we have the ideal balance, as far as they were concerned, between quality of sound, different registers of sound, and volume. So what we have on an instrument like this is a much stronger stringing system. So the case has to be much stronger in order to accommodate these thicker strings. Thicker strings need to be hit harder with bigger hammers, so we also have a much stronger hammer action underneath here. So the hammers are a bit bigger, the strings are a bit thicker, and that necessitated a stronger construction, as I've said. This means that we have iron bars being introduced for the first time. So on this instrument we can see that there are gap spacers made of iron, there are 4 of those, and then 2 iron bars in the treble to hold this bit of the instrument, which is actually the weakest part of the construction, to hold it in a much stronger position and allow for these higher tension strings to go in. This gives the instrument such a bloom to the sound, the fact that it's got this bigger hammers and thicker strings. What this allows is, of course, a piano like this to be played in larger concert halls, to be played up against all the orchestral instruments which were also getting louder at the time, and it makes for a really quite exciting sound. It's worth saying at this time, though, that one of the things that was prized, particularly by Broadwoods and their rival firm Clementi at the time, was beauty of tone as well. And that's where this instrument scores very, very highly. It has a beautiful sound across the different registers. The different registers aspects is also something that's very different between this instrument and what came later. Nowadays we look for evenness of tone across the whole range of a piano, but on an instrument like this they were looking for exactly the opposite. They were looking for different tonal areas within different ranges of the piano. So in the treble we have a very bright, almost glassy sort of quality to the treble, and as we go lower down the instrument we end up with a much richer, beefier sound, and this together makes for all these different areas, almost like an orchestra within the piano sound itself. A piano like this marks a real social change. Up until now, the piano was really something that appeared in a drawing room, but now with an instrument of this power, you could actually have a visiting virtuoso playing to a huge hall full of people, and that meant that the rising middle classes could go to concerts, they could hear their latest greatest virtuosi like Beethoven coming on tour, and this marked a real sort of start of a sort of composer-pianist superstardom, which actually we still see today. I first came across this instrument when I was working at the Finchcock's collection as it was then, and I immediately fell in love with all these qualities of this instrument. To me, it marked everything that was wonderful about early instruments. This different areas of sound within the instrument, the idea that you could have something that was so different to a modern instrument and represented such a different way of thinking about music. And also, it's so responsive. We've got this beautiful mixture between a lightish action but with these larger hammers. So we feel we're really making the sound, which is quite wonderful. The way that the instrument actually resonates as well, as you'll hear in the piece that I'm going to play, is quite interesting for a modern trained pianist. We're so used to clarity these days, and an instrument like this has rather small dampers, but it was designed, as I say, for volume, but also for resonance. So the whole of the instrument actually resonates when you play. So we get this wonderful echo, and that's quite interesting when we start playing. We expect to be able to create crystal clear clarity, And we can't get that at all. What we have to do is work with this overall sound production of the instrument. Sometimes it means waiting a little bit longer between phrases to allow the sound to die away before the harmony mixes up, or it might mean just generally that we just embrace it. We know, for example, that Beethoven was writing pedal marks where he expected us to just blur the edges of harmonies. It seems to be a very definite aesthetic from the 19th century about how pianists played, and an instrument like this really highlights that for us. The piece I've chosen to play is by Ferdinand Ries. Ferdinand Ries is perhaps best known today as Beethoven's secretary and his helper. He was responsible for his relationship with publishers. He was responsible for organising music and benefit concerts. In fact, Ries was also an extremely accomplished pianist and performer in his own right. Beethoven trusted him to give one of the early performances of his third piano concerto in C minor, and he was actually allowed to compose his own cadenza, which is pretty rare for Beethoven's performances at that time. Ries himself wrote 9 piano concertos and a whole host of other repertoire, including operas, oratorios, all sorts of works. What's really interesting for us as well is how much Ries travelled. He travelled across Europe and settled and spent serious amounts of time in lots of different major cities, including London. And it's from his London patch that I've chosen some music that I think works beautifully on this instrument, possibly because it was composed sitting at a not dissimilar instrument. This is from a set of 12 trifles he wrote, a wonderfully English title in itself. And this music is witty, it's charming, it's in a minor key, so it involves a slightly Sturm und Drang feel to the whole thing. But I've chosen it because it uses quite a wide range of the piano, and it has a middle section which uses the treble of the piano and also this idea of big resonance. He asks the performer to basically allow the harmonies just to mould together. Even though there seems to be quite a lot of detail in the hands, he expects it just to be an effect rather than an actual virtuosic part. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, this brief demonstration of this rather wonderful instrument. It's been a pleasure to get to know it again after all this time and to actually work out why these instruments are so important for the interpretation of this music. Thank you for watching.
If you'd like to find out more about the charity and the workshops and the events that take place here, then please do so. If you'd like to support, we'd like you to do that as well. Go to the comments section beneath this film or go and visit the Finchcock's charity website.